Mr. Hurwitz, please call your first witness.
Your Honor, State of Texas calls Allisa Findley.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Thank you very much.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Ms. Findley. I guess before we get started, because I want you to talk a little bit about Bo, so that the jury kind of knows a little bit about this man. Let's talk a little bit about you. Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury a little bit about yourself.
I am a project coordinator for a health insurance company in New York. I am a mother of 3 boys and a member of the Church of Christ.
Okay. And who is Botham Jean to you?
Botham was my little brother. He's 9 years younger than me. He was my friend. He was my person.
Did you guys always have a very close relationship, or was that something that happened later in life?
I would say we've always had a close relationship because we were raised as a close family. So we were always in contact. We've always maintained a friendship to the point where we were like best friends. Mm-hmm.
How often did you talk to Bo?
I spoke to him almost every day, either by telephone or text message. We always had contact every day.
And I want to take this moment for you to show the jury and tell the jury about his family, his mom. What's his mom's name?
Allison Shaw.
Would you stand up, please? And Bo's dad?
Bertram Shaw.
Bertram. And Brant is his younger brother?
Brant Shaw.
Okay. And that's Bo's grandma, right?
Gloria Charles, yes.
Okay. What kind of, y'all can have a seat, thank you so much. Tell me about the family dynamic. Where did y'all grow up? What was Bo's kind of relationship as, I guess, like a middle-ish child? Tell us a little bit about that.
We grew up in St. Lucia. It's a Caribbean island. Growing up, Botham was always very active. I would say he was a little adventurous. One time, he was at the house and he decided to get on our dog and have the dog run around the house with him like a horse, and he loved it. I was in a panic, but that was the type of person he was. When he started high school, he started a choir at the high school. He also started song leading at our church, Church of Christ, and he fell in love with music. He even wrote songs, church songs. We found 4 songs that he wrote, all about Christ and wanting to get to heaven.
Did Bo have a very close personal relationship with God?
He did.
Important in his life?
Yes, we grew up in the church. From the womb, we've always been going to church.
How is it that you and Bo, both being from St. Lucia, how did you guys end up here in the States?
I moved when I was 19 to go to school. He took the same path where he applied for Harding University and got accepted and transitioned to America as well.
Okay. So it was an educational opportunity that brought him to this country, is that
Yes.
right? Okay. Now, I guess without any further ado, Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes.
Allisa, I want to show you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit Number 1. Can you tell me who this is in this photograph?
That's Botham.
Okay. And can you tell me when this photograph was taken? Do you know?
I know it was taken at Harding University outside the Rock House. I would say maybe 2014.
Okay. Does this fairly inaccurately depict your brother Bo?
Yes.
I offer States 1.
No objection.
It's admitted.
Permission to publish. Bo's got a big smile on his face. Is that uncommon?
No.
Tell me about Bo. Tell me about his demeanor. You know, we have people that we walk through life with that are always serious. We have some angry people. We have happy people. Where did Bo fit on the spectrum?
He was always a happy person. He loved having fun. He was a fun-loving person. always saw the greener side of everything.
So you said that he was accepted to Harding University. What kind of academic discipline was he interested in?
He graduated with a double major in accounting and management information systems.
And then give us an idea of how his education and then his future career opportunities, how did that kind of unfold for him?
He got accepted to an internship with PwC while he was at Harding here in Dallas. When he came out here, they put him up in a hotel, and he called and FaceTime. He was so excited just to have the opportunity. Then when he got accepted into the internship, he called crying. He was so over the moon. And from that internship, he got hired as an accountant for PwC.
And what is PwC?
PricewaterhouseCoopers is an accounting firm.
Okay. This must have been quite an honor for him. It's a very prestigious firm.
It is, yes.
Was he excited about where his life was going, not only in the church, but also in his career?
Yes, he was very excited. I tried to convince him to move to New York with me, even with PwC, because they're out there as well. But he had a career path in mind, and he wanted to get to a senior level before he transitioned to any other place.
Okay, you wanted him to be close to you.
I did, yes. Because he was my baby brother. I'm a little overprotective of my siblings and my children, so I wanted him close.
And that was that his long-term goal, was to get up there close to you as well?
Not really.
That was more what you wanted.
Right, it was my long-term goal for him, yeah.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about the events on September 6th. Did you talk to Bo on September the 6th?
I did. I spoke with them.
What was his general mood? I mean, the rules of evidence, unfortunately, they don't allow you to talk about statements that were made outside of a courtroom. Okay, so I can't ask you what you guys talked about or what he said. Okay. But I want you to tell me, what was his general mood?
He was happy. Can I tell you why?
Well, only if you know from independent reasons. You can't. Let me ask you this: was Bo's birthday coming up soon?
Yes, his birthday was coming up, and he was very excited about that. We went back and forth about presents for about a month. So our conversation was in part about his present for his birthday.
Okay, well, what was it you were planning on getting Bo for his birthday?
Well, I decided, and prior we had a conversation, that I would give him pots and pans because he had only 2 in his apartment. So I wanted to get him a full set because it's the grown-up thing to do. So he agreed. But when I spoke to him that day, he said he wanted Drake tickets because apparently Drake was in concert at some point. So I told him, well, I thought we agreed that you were going to be a grown-up this year. And he said, okay, fine, yes, get me the pots and pans. So we agreed on that.
You agreed on that?
Yes.
I see. So the pots and pans weren't a huge hit with him initially?
No.
Okay. All right. I do want to talk with you about something a little bit more serious now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you were made aware that after Bo had been shot, when the police were in his home, they found a baggie of marijuana.
Right.
Were you aware that Bo smoked marijuana?
I was aware.
Can you give the jury an idea why you believe he would partake in marijuana?
While he was at Harding, he was diagnosed with ADHD, and he was prescribed Adderall. And he started taking the Adderall, but he always complained he didn't like how it made him feel. Like, one, he couldn't sleep while he was on Adderall. And then for him to sleep, he would have to stop taking it completely. And then he described it as crashing when he stopped taking it. So it was always back and forth with it. So he stopped taking it completely, and that's when he started smoking.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Listen, I'm not a judge. Right, wrong, or indifferent, this is the reason why he chose to smoke marijuana.
Right.
Was it anything evil on his part, or was this the way in which he felt he medicated himself so that he could cope?
That was his coping.
Okay. So I want to ask you this. Did Bo ever manifest any weird reactions to marijuana, or was it kind of like the typical effect of a person smoking marijuana? I mean, did he turn into a crazy lunatic?
No, he would be mellow. Same, both them, just laughing more, but nothing extraordinary.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about that particular day a little bit more. Do you know what Bo's plans were for that particular evening?
We spoke about, I asked him if he would be watching the football game, because it was the first game of the season, the NFL season, and he thought the season already started, so he was excited that he didn't miss it, because he had a fantasy football league, so it was crucial that he watched the games. So his plan was to stay home and watch that game that night.
Do you know whether or not he had any other plans? I mean, did he have a girlfriend who was staying over or anything like that?
He did not mention that.
Okay. Do you know, was Bo in any kind of a significant relationship at the time?
He started seeing Cynthia, I think her name is, a few weeks before. It wasn't anything serious. It didn't get to that point as yet, and I just know he started seeing a few weeks before.
When did you find out what had happened to Bo?
I received a call from Baylor University Hospital. It was about a little after midnight on the 7th. New York is an hour ahead, so it was after midnight from my time. I received a call from a social worker, and she asked me a few questions. Do I know Botham Ja? What is his date of birth? What is his address? Where does he work? And then she told me that he was brought in with a gunshot wound, and he succumbed to his injuries.
Help us understand, how does a person process that?
At first, I didn't believe it because it was just not anything that I would expect. When I got the call, I thought maybe it was a car accident. So I wasn't expecting to hear that he was shot. I know I just immediately became cold. It just didn't make sense to me.
How long did it take you before you finally accepted the reality that Bo was gone?
Honestly, I don't think I've accepted it as yet. I think it will still take time. Sometimes I have still called his number because he's still in my favorites on my phone. So I've called sometimes just to see if he will answer. So I haven't accepted it as yet.
Do you still miss him?
I miss him every single day. Being in Dallas is hard, that he's not here. So I miss him.
Did you come to Dallas looking for some answers?
I did. I came also looking for closure because I think having this hurdle, just getting over this hurdle will probably lead to healing. So I'm hoping for that this portion to be finally over and done with so my entire family can heal.
Who had to tell Allison and Bertram about that?
I did.
Tell me how that went.
I really, when I hung up the phone with the hospital, my first thought was to not tell them, because I wanted, especially my mother, to have just one more good night of sleep before getting the news. But I decided against it, and she was at my house in New York at the time. So I went and I just repeated the words the social worker told me.
I imagine that must have been heart-wrenching for them.
It was my mom immediately started crying, like just bust out in tears. She started dialing the number for Bertram and the words just couldn't come out. So I took the phone from her and told him again, just repeated the words. I called my aunt, same thing, I just repeated the words because I didn't at the time process the words. So I was just repeating it to them.
I wanted to ask you another question about the police investigation inside Beau's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
They found a series of 3 medications, an anti-nausea, I think an anti-inflammatory, and a pain medication.
Mm-hmm.
Had Beau had any kind of surgical or dental work recently?
Yes, he had a wisdom tooth removed. He was on the plan to have all 4 removed, but they were doing it one at a time. So he had the first one removed a few weeks before that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And has that been kind of a painful process for him?
It was. I know a few days after it happened, the tooth was pulled, he stayed home. He was on a strict liquid diet, well, soups, hot food. So he was eating soups every day. He even took a picture of the Chick-fil-A soup and sent it to me. And that day, September 6th, he finally got the okay to eat ice cream.
Was that good progress for Beau?
Yes, he was very excited about eating ice cream because he loves ice cream. He loved ice cream. Even as a child, we used to call him Milky Way because he just loved eating ice cream. Anything milky, he's all for it.
So September the 6th, 2018 was the day, obviously, that Beau got shot. Mm-hmm. Did you meet with a Texas Ranger on Saturday, September the 8th, 2018?
I did.
Okay. And again, I can't ask you to go over the question and answers, but I want to ask you this question.
Mm-hmm.
You were aware that the Texas Rangers had just started the investigation into this particular case, is that right?
Yes.
Was your impression, having talked to the Texas Rangers right after they started this investigation, that they were going to give a fair investigation to Beau?
I did not.
Object to relevance, Judge.
Sustained.
I'll ask the witness.
I have no questions.
They should be excused.
Oh, Judge, actually, may I recall, Ms. Finley, I had one other matter I wanted to show her. May I proceed?
Yes.
Okay. Allisa, I'm sorry I forgot about this.
Judge, we'll stipulate that the autopsy photo is the same as the same individual that's in State's Exhibit number 1. Just will offer that stipulation.
And we'll offer State's Exhibit 2 for all purposes.
Thank you. It's admitted for all purposes.
I have no other questions.
Okay.
No.
Ms. Finley,
Nothing further, Judge.
may she be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Earlier, you said that you may have some objections to her remaining in the courtroom. Do you still have any objections to
I don't
this?
see any factual, I don't see any basis for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Finley. You may rejoin your family.
Your Honor, we call Robert Watson.
Did you say Watson?
Robert Watson, Your Honor.
The testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you. Make yourself.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Please.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Please state your first and last name
Robert Watson,
and spell that for court order.
Watson, Robert, common spelling.
And Mr. Watson, how are you currently employed?
I'm employed as a sergeant with the Dallas Police Department,
And how long have you been with the Dallas Police Department?
14 years.
14 years. And could you introduce yourself to the jury and tell them a little bit about your background and what did you do prior to becoming a police officer?
Prior to becoming a police officer, I was a youth pastor in the Pleasant Grove area. I'm currently assigned to the Southeast CRT Deployment Unit at the Southeast Patrol Division. I've been a supervisor for 7 years, and again, I've been on for 14 years.
And in your 14 years with the Dallas Police Department, Sergeant, what other assignments have you held?
Prior to being the CRT supervisor, I was a patrol sergeant. Prior to that, I was assigned to the South Central CRT unit as an officer, and then I was a patrol officer at the South Central Division and the Central Division before completing my police academy with the Dallas Police Department.
And you just mentioned the police academy. My next question is, what is your training and experience that led you to becoming a sergeant over CRT?
So I attended the Dallas Police Academy and completed that back in 2005. Every 2 years, we do 40 hours of update training. When I promoted to sergeant, I attended a 6-week supervisory course through the Caruth Police Institute, and it's continued update training annually.
Continual training annually?
Yes, ma'am.
And Sergeant Watson, with CRT, is there any specialized training that your unit undertakes?
CRT mainly, that's different from patrol officers. CRT gets one main training course, which is arrest warrant execution, and that's a 2-day class, 16 hours. The SWAT unit puts on that training. That's mainly the only training that we have that is different from the patrol officers, outside of covert surveillance training also, and that's a 2-day, 16-hour class.
And CRT, that's the crime response team, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it under the patrol division?
It is.
And Sergeant, would you tell us a little bit about what do you do in CRT?
So the crime reduction team, at that time, there were 2 crime reduction teams per patrol division. Each team is comprised of 6 either senior corporals and or police officers. The one CRT team will work usually between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., and then the second one will work between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m. And what our responsibilities included, it was multifaceted, but the main things we dealt with were narcotics complaints, and those complaints could come from several places, including the division commander, the city council, citizens will call in complaints, and we'll check on those. We also executed arrest warrants. We got those mainly from our investigative unit at each station, which could include burglaries or BMVs. We would also work with outside units, including, DEA task force, ATF, the FBI. We work with municipalities that border our channel, and we'll assist them with any crime trends that are occurring in their city and our city that match. Those are the main things that we do on a regular basis.
And what, if you would explain to the jury, would a typical or a usual day for a CRT member consist of?
Once we come in, we usually have a detail that could be 10 to 15 minutes. People, the members will apprise each other of what they're working on or what's going on. Once you do that, there's reports that have come in overnight or the week. They'll do research. They'll go out in the field and conduct surveillance. They'll make traffic stops. They'll look for wanted fugitives, and that's kind of a daily basis thing.
And Sergeant, how many members, going back to September 6, 2018, about how many members were on the unit that you supervised?
If I recall correctly, I think there were 5 at the time. I think we were short 1.
And can you please state their names for the jury?
It was Martin Rivera, Amber Guyger, Justin Hellengard, Thomas McPherson, and William Bruce.
And Sergeant Watson, so you were Defendant Guyger's supervisor, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you see the defendant here in the courtroom today?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you please identify the defendant by an article of clothing?
She has a blue shirt on.
We'll let the record reflect that this witness has identified the defendant in court. Sergeant, let's go back. So you said you had 5 members on the team back in September 6 of 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
And you were short a person?
I believe so.
And what's the criteria to become a member of the CRT unit?
Since it's an interview position, we look for character, integrity, work ethic, We also look for officers who are team players and work well with others. Officers who are responsible, have a good base for foundation for report writing, and know search and seizure law.
And is there a time requirement in terms of, do you have to have so many years with the Dallas Police Department to be considered for the CRT unit?
No, ma'am.
And typically though, do you take officers right out of the academy?
No, ma'am.
So explain to the jury, how does that work?
Once an officer leaves the academy, they'll be on field training, and that lasts for, I believe, 24 weeks still. Once they're off field training, they'll have a probationary period where they'll ride with a officer who has been on for several years. And then once they're off probation, then they can apply for a CRT or deployment or any other position.
And how often are spots available in the CRT unit?
A CRT is a stepping stone for officers to move from patrol to an investigative bureau or any other bureau within the department. So we do have some turnover, but that's just to get them to the next step.
And with respect to the defendant, were you a part of the interview team that interviewed the defendant for consideration for your division?
Yes.
Please explain to the jury how that process worked.
Officers have a specific period of time to notify once a job is posted within the department. When they notify a supervisor, then the job posting will close. Then the officer will have to gather whatever necessary materials that the supervisor suggests they need in order to interview. The interview is a panel of 3 sergeants. Sometimes the lieutenant will sit in, and every officer is asked the same question. The responses are taken into consideration, and they also submit a resume. And that's how the process goes. Once the interviews are over, several names are usually chosen and forwarded up the chain, and the chain of command will make a decision on who is going to take the spot.
And were you familiar with Defendant Guyger prior to the interview process for your CRT team?
Just a little bit.
And with the interview process with Defendant Guyger, I guess would you say that she was highly capable and competent?
Absolutely.
And that, I guess what you knew of her prior to her interview is that, did you believe she would be a good fit for your team?
I did.
And when we're talking about CRT, these are experienced officers. Are they proactive?
Absolutely.
And in terms of proactive, does that mean having to go out and kind of drum up your own work?
Yes, ma'am.
Please explain to the jury exactly what that means in terms of drumming up your own work.
So that would go back to researching prior offenses that have come in, looking for wanted fugitives who have an arrest warrant out for them, and we can't find them, or somebody hasn't picked them up yet and brought them to Lew Sterrett. Those are the kind of things, or narcotics locations. If a citizen calls in and says this place is selling narcotics, then you have to go out and be able to determine whether or not that is actually taking place.
And do CRT members answer calls for service, like over dispatch?
They do. When the call load is backed up, they'll answer calls. If there are hot calls, which are priority 1 calls that are robberies in progress, things where people need help right away, then we will definitely answer those kind of calls.
And so is it fair to say that CRT assists with the high-risk sort of crimes, or
Yes,
more
ma'am.
violent crimes?
Yes, ma'am.
Sergeant Watson, would you please explain to the jury, back in September of 2018, what was the focus of the CRT unit right around the time of September 6th?
The
task and what were you guys working on?
The CRT team was assisting the SWAT team with some, I believe, robbery suspects. I can't remember the location, but there had been several robberies in the Southeast Division, and that was their mission for the time.
And were these robbery suspects, had they been problematic? Were they violent in the area?
Yes, ma'am.
And was there a high priority to assist SWAT with apprehending the suspects?
Yes, it's always priority to assist our other units.
And is it common for CRT to work with SWAT on these sort of, missions or assignments, if you will?
Yes, ma'am.
And on September 6th, did SWAT ask for CRT to assist them with some robbery suspects?
I'm not sure how it unfolded that day, but at some point, yeah, they requested assistance, and the CRT team went out there.
And the members of the CRT team, did that include the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
And is it your understanding that they did respond to assist SWAT that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you know which perimeter were they working?
I believe they were working the perimeter right out aside the location.
And so would that be the outer perimeter?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you at the scene that day?
I was not.
Okay. Were you aware of the assignment and what was going on?
Yes, ma'am.
And how does that work? How do you receive a notification of what actually is occurring? Because at some point there were some suspects that were arrested, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And were you notified of that?
Yes, ma'am.
And then what is your role and capacity at that point?
So at that point, that's a SWAT operation. So the SWAT commander is out there, and they'll handle all of that. We just assist. So there's not really a need for 2 or 3 supervisors out there to control that situation.
And how would you describe your team back on September 6, 2018? Were you guys a close-knit team?
I believe everybody worked very well together. They worked good together, and they were very proactive. They worked hard together, and I never really had any problems with anybody.
Okay. And did anyone have any problems with you?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Did anyone ever express any feelings that maybe you didn't have their back or support them?
Not that I'm aware of.
And did you feel that way about any member of your team, that they weren't pulling their weight?
Absolutely not.
Sergeant Watson, what are, if you could explain for the jury, what are general orders of the Dallas Police Department?
A brief description would be general orders are the rules and regulations that tell officers what they can and can't do for the Dallas Police Department.
And would it be fair to say that there are numerous rules and regulations when it comes to the general orders?
Yes, ma'am.
And what are standard operating procedures or patrol procedures?
So the operating procedures are going to be a little more specific, and they're going to tell officers how they should respond to specific calls and deal with certain incidents. And they even have maybe the structure and responsibilities of different units within the department.
And is it fair to say that in regards to the crime response team, or CRT as it's known, that there's also a specific SOP related to your unit, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And within that, it kind of, as you stated, listed out the rules and regulations, but also in terms of how the sergeants and senior corporals and your duties and responsibilities.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Poach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Sergeant, I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 22. Here, I'll have to let you take a look at that. And are you familiar with States 22?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is this, Sergeant?
It's a copy of the Dallas Police General Orders and Patrol SOP.
And Sergeant, is it fair to say, I know that we mentioned earlier, but there are hundreds of pages of these general orders and SOPs, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And in a simplified form, we put them on a CD, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you had an opportunity to actually review the CD?
Yes, ma'am.
And these do in fact contain the general orders and the SOPs of the Dallas Police Department as they existed back in 2018.
Yes, ma'am.
At this time, Your Honor, I would like to offer State's Exhibit number 22. It is under business records affidavit. I'm going to go ahead and tender it to the defense for the objection.
Well, we'd object to it. It's we're talking about hundreds of pages of material that's going to confuse the jury. This incident was not an on-duty incident.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
We're going to object to it as it's several hundred pages of information that is not relevant. It's going to confuse and mislead the jury. This situation, the incident which occurred was Ms. Guyger was off duty at the time of the incident.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm not asking to publish all of the hundreds of pages, Your Honor. I mean, this is the general orders and the SOPs, our business record that is authenticated by an accompanying business records affidavit. And I can assure to the court I'm not going to publish all hundreds of pages. There are some specific ones that I can publish.
Do you intend to use
I
specific?
do, yes, Your Honor. I would like to, and I have them marked, State's Exhibit 23, 312, 313, and 314. That is going to be the CRT.
Are you offering states 21 for all purposes or just record purposes?
At this time, Your Honor, I can offer States 22, I believe, for record purposes, and then I will offer States Exhibit 23, States Exhibit 312, States Exhibit 313, and States Exhibit 314 for all purposes, and I'm tendering those to the Defense Counsel, and those are the...
Before we go to those, States Exhibit 22 will be admitted for record purposes. And what were the ensuing numbers that you gave?
312, Your Honor,
312,
313, and 314. And States Exhibit number 23.
did you say no objection?
No objection to 312, 313, 314, and 23.
They're all admitted for all purposes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Information or coaching, Your Honor.
Yes.
And Sergeant Watson, I'm going to show you again. Take a look at States Exhibit number 23. And what is States Exhibit number 23, Sergeant?
It is the SOP for the crime reduction team.
Okay, and that sets out all the rules and procedures for your unit.
Yes, ma'am.
And can you take a look at States Exhibit number 312?
Yes, ma'am. It's the SOP for the burglary in progress.
And what is that actual SOP number?
1509.
And could you read that title as well?
Yes, ma'am. Burglary in progress, burglar alarm, open building.
And what is States Exhibit number 312 related to, or what does that mean?
That gives the officer directions on how the best way to answer a burglary in progress, burglar alarm, or open building is to be conducted.
And what is States Exhibit number 313?
That is the standard operating procedure for barricaded persons, 1001.
And what is the purpose of 1001?
That sets forth the operating procedure for responding to a barricaded person.
And then lastly, what is States Exhibit number 314?
That is standard operating procedure 1602 K9 use, and that is the operating procedure to use K9 in different circumstances.
Okay. Now, Sergeant Watson, what, in your opinion, would you say is the purpose of these general standard operating procedures and the general orders?
Those are the best practices when answering those specific kind of situations.
And best practices, what do you mean by the best practices?
Generally, the years and years of doing something, you refine it and revise it so that it's the best way to do it, tactically, manpower-wise.
And would you say that these rules, are they designed for officer safety?
Yes, ma'am.
And I guess subsequently the safety of the public as well?
Yes, ma'am.
And going back to States Exhibit number 312, which talks about the burglary in progress, burglar alarm, and open building calls, also known as SOP 1509. In CRT, do you have a lot of situations to where officers are responding to burglary calls or open building?
Sometimes.
And what is the procedure for those calls? How should they be handled?
Generally, a two-man will answer that call. During the day and during night hours are totally different because you have to use your lights on your car, you have flashlights and other things that you have to use. Generally, you look for if there has been entry made into whatever location you're looking for. If there has been, then you have several options open to you as far as calling for more officers, setting a perimeter so that if the person is in the location, they can't get away. You also have the option to call for a K9 to search a large building, or for Air 1, which is our police helicopter, to check a roof to make sure nobody's on top hiding. That's kind of the short version.
And thank you for that. Now, earlier you mentioned, you said that typically you work in teams or two-man teams. What's the purpose for that?
So it just depends on who's there that day. We ride one-man and two-man. There's no requirement to ride two-man, but when we're working on something together, then we try to make it more than just one man.
Is it safety in numbers?
Yes, ma'am.
you have a partner, is there someone available to kind of cover you or watch your back?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
vice versa?
Yes.
With SOP 1509, I know it says that you have a partner. If you find yourself in a building and it looks as if there's been entry, that you have various options. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And I believe you stated one of those options is you can call for backup.
Yes, ma'am.
If you have a partner, you can, is it, I guess, an area of, if you realize that someone's inside of the building or the habitation, and you can either call for a K-9 that can assist you with the building search at that point, or what happens if you find someone in a home and you aren't able to communicate with them? What's another, how should an officer handle that situation?
As far as them not being able to hear you, because you can
Yeah.
always loud hail them on your squad car speaker.
So you can use a squad car speaker, that's
Yes, ma'am.
correct. So let's say if they aren't following your commands.
If they're not following your commands, then you would treat it as a barricaded person.
And when we say a barricaded person, because I know we have a separate standard operating procedure for that than we do from the burglary open door call, what makes barricaded persons special?
You have to notify SWAT,
Okay.
and they'll come out and respond.
And in that situation, if you have a barricaded person, what should that initial responding officer do? What is their focus at that point in time?
Is to maintain a perimeter and block any routes of escape.
Can you, so maintaining that perimeter, would it be one of a mission of containment at that point, if you will?
Yes, ma'am.
Until backup arrives?
Yes, ma'am.
Would they take cover or even conceal themselves?
Yes, cover and concealment. Cover is hard cover in case they have a weapon. You can get in front of something that would stop a bullet. Concealment is just hiding behind something but still keeping eyes so that you can see if they're trying to make an escape.
So concealment, you can hide your person but not necessarily protect your body should something come through whatever you're
Yes,
hiding
ma'am.
behind.
Yes, ma'am.
And so you've got the options. You work in two-man teams. Now, earlier you also mentioned the use of lights. Why is lighting important?
So you can see what's going on.
Okay. I mean, that would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
So you call for cover. You either get yourself in a position to where you're safe while you're waiting for your backup to arrive. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
If it's a barricaded situation, you're going to call for SWAT and again get to a perimeter where you're safe. If it's a situation where you feel like you might need to call in the K-9s or Air 1, you could do that.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to ask you about the SOPs for CRT. I know you stated earlier that the only really specialized training is maybe a couple of day course that you do. Is that course taught by SWAT?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that, do you do drills for open door building searches?
Arrest warrant execution, not so much open building, but we treat them fairly the same.
You're treated the same?
For the most part. I
And
mean,
why?
because you're looking for somebody. If you're executing an arrest warrant, you're looking for a wanted fugitive. In open building, you're going to be safe also, but you're clearing a building is what you're doing with an open building.
I guess if it's safe to say you don't know what you're walking into, it's best to be prepared
That's it.
before
Yes.
you head in.
Yes, ma'am.
And in the drills that are done, I guess, through that course by SWAT, are the officers paired in teams?
It's a group, usually five officers and a supervisor.
Okay. And, or I guess, are they putting into practice what's detailed in these SOPs and the general orders of working with a partner, maintaining cover?
Some of the tactics are the same, yes.
Okay. What is a tactical retreat?
Is to safely remove yourself from a situation.
Now, is that to say that you just like turn around and run away?
No, ma'am. You retreat to a perimeter, is what it basically means.
Okay, retreat to a perimeter. And again, the perimeter is an area, I guess, that's kind of away from wherever the threat may possibly be.
Cover concealment.
But under concealment, where the officers can safely maintain a position until additional backup arrives.
Yes, ma'am.
Give me just a moment. Sergeant Watson, in your years, I believe earlier you stated it's been about 6 years since you've been a sergeant over a CRT division.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you had situations to where officers, members of your team have come to you and said, I'm just too exhausted and too tired to work?
They'll ask for days off.
And what do you do in those situations?
For the most part, we allow it.
You allow it, okay. Would it be a responsible thing for a supervisor to address that issue?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever had a situation to where you felt like a member of your team was unfit for duty?
No.
Okay. And that's within your 6 years. You never had someone too tired to where you felt that they were a danger to the public to continue working?
No.
If you did have a situation as such, how would you address it?
Do my best to allow them to go home or go back to the station.
Do you make use of relief officers when you can?
Yes.
And in fact, on September 6, 2018, for a couple of the members of your team, they had other, I guess, events that they needed to get to. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And so other members of your team were covering for them.
Yes, ma'am.
Can Commissioner approach your honor?
Yes.
Well, Sergeant, this isn't marked as a state's exhibit yet, but I want you to take a look at that and tell me if you're familiar with that.
Yes, ma'am.
And is that a section that's found within the general orders of the Dallas Police Department?
Yes, ma'am. It's part of the code of conduct.
The code of conduct. And what exactly does the code of conduct, in your own words, what's the purpose of the code of conduct?
To spell out how an officer should carry themselves and act.
And Sergeant Watson, are you familiar with a rule or a general order in the code of conduct that deals with officers being off duty?
I'm not sure I know which one you're referring to.
I know there's quite a few of them, but is there a rule that states that officers are always considered on duty even when off duty?
Yes, ma'am.
And is the purpose of that rule to protect life and property?
Yes, ma'am.
And what else do you know about that rule?
I'm not sure what you want me to expound on.
Well, just your knowledge of what does that rule mean to you?
That you always have to carry yourself as professional and conduct your business appropriately. If you're off duty and something occurs, then you have an obligation to call 911, report something that occurs.
Are there any different rules saying that, or any different procedures as to, based on training and experience that an officer receives that says if you're off duty, you should act differently than when you're on duty?
Not that I recall.
In that professional rules of conduct, it's actually titled Professional Conduct and Personal Bearing. Is that correct in the general orders?
Yes, ma'am.
And I know, and I've got it now, it's going to be marked as State's Exhibit number 315, and if it's helpful, I can bring it back up here to refresh your
Yes,
memory.
ma'am, if you could.
Would that be helpful?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Would a violation of the rules, though, be considered a dereliction of duty?
It could be, yes.
And so I'm going to bring it back up here to refresh your memory, and at this time, it is marked as State's Exhibit number 315. And you let me know after you read it. You finished, Sergeant?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, exactly what is the title of State's Exhibit 315?
It is going to be, Your Honor, Professional Conduct and Personal Bearing.
And your objection to that exhibit is what?
Your Honor, it's irrelevant to what happened. They're trying to introduce some sort of administrative violation into the evidence that's irrelevant to the case.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to need you to speak up just a little bit. I don't know if my ears are clogged, but I don't want to guess at what it is you're saying.
Ma'am, I believe it's irrelevant. They're trying to introduce an administrative violation into the case. That's not relevant to the case.
Judge, that's not what we're trying to do at all. Your Honor, two things. Mr. Snyder said in a speaking objection that, very clearly this was off-duty and therefore the general orders don't apply in his objection to our admission of that. But secondarily, Your Honor, we're not looking to show conformity with a bad act. The orders of the Dallas Police Department say, in relevant part, for the purposes of protecting life and property, Officers will always be considered on duty while in the city of Dallas and shall be prepared to act to the extent possible anytime circumstances indicate their service is required. The above enforcement action will not include enforcement of Class C misdemeanors, and it goes on to talk about for traffic offenses. So an off-duty officer need not go on duty pursuant to his obligations according to DPD for that, or for enforcement responsibilities beyond the ability of the officer when he is not armed. Amber Guyger was armed. We're going to prove that. This indicates that as soon as Mr. Rogers gave an opening statement in which he said that she believed that there was an intruder in her home, that means that she is now on duty according to the orders and the standard operating procedures of the Dallas Police Department, and she should have been governed by what she was taught. That again goes to the circumstances she finds herself in and whether she acted reasonably. For all purposes.
315.
315.
Which one of you are going to speak?
I'm going to give Mr. Mullin.
It's also improper character trait evidence. They're trying to say that because she didn't conform with administrative procedure, that makes it relevant to whether she is guilty of the indicted offense. So
I'm not going to make that conclusion that that's what it is they're trying to say. I think this door was opened when your co-counsel mentioned that she was in fact off duty. From what I'm listening, that's how I'm hearing how we started down this road. And Sergeant Watson has testified that a DPD officer is in fact on duty at all times, and I believe the state was just entering into evidence their policies and procedures that state the same thing. So, and just so we're clear, I am not a fan of speaking objections. I need you to stand up, state your legal objection, and be done with it. Because all kinds of invited error happen when we have speaking objections, including you arguing before this jury that Ms. Guyger was in fact off duty when this happened. And she was, but she is also a Dallas police officer. So what is your objection to State's Exhibit 315?
Again, Your Honor, it's irrelevant to the other policies as they're introduced. If they want to try to hold her to the policies that they've already introduced into evidence, then they have the ability to do that. Now, it's irrelevant whether or not there's a code of conduct. If they're going to try to prove that she's violated the code of conduct by not following these other policies, which we certainly don't agree were applicable in the situation.
I don't know if I can jump that far. I certainly think that that would be a question that would be objectionable. But I'm going to overrule your objection to State's Exhibit. Are you even offering 315?
Yes, Your Honor, we're offering 315 for all purposes.
I'm going to overrule your objection to State's Exhibit 315. Is there anything else that we need to take up before we bring the jury back here?
Judge, there is a quick matter. Did you have something?
No, just make sure, is this admitted, Judge? I didn't hear that part.
Yes.
Thank you.
Judge, just so that we don't have to take another break in between for the next witness, I believe that discussions with the defense during the break, the state is going to offer State's Exhibit 3 and 307 into evidence. These are going to be extracts from the phone dump of Amber Guyger for the date of...
Let me get these numbers. 3?
Yes.
And what might 3 be?
3 is going to be the timeline, the extract of her records in their entirety for September the 6th, 2018. Yeah, that's correct. 307, Your Honor, is...
From her phone?
Yes, ma'am. 307 is going to be just those for which she had conversations with Martin Rivera.
Is 303 offered for what purposes?
It's
For
going to
record?
be, no ma'am, 3 and 307 for all purposes, and I believe we have agreement.
How far into the evening does this timeline extend?
I believe it extends until midnight, but I'd have to take a look at the records.
Does that encompass the conversations that she allegedly had with her sister?
No, ma'am, I don't believe so.
Because it wasn't clear to me which day that might have taken place.
Right, no, that was out.
And when you say the phone records concerning her and Mr. Rivera, does 307 encompass the text as well as the time frame of the telephone conversation?
Yes, ma'am, it does. 307 and 3 would cover both, in both of those. Anything, 3 would cover the entire day, because it also includes location data. 307 is just extracting from 3 just the specific text messages and interactions over the phone with Martin Rivera.
All of them?
Well, the ones that we were able to recover, Your Honor. These were all deleted, as the court is aware, and we had to go through a process to try and recover them. These were the text messages and the information that we were able to recover. I simply can't tell the court that it's all of them because I don't know.
These are what you all have agreed to?
Well, I didn't, let's just, 307. Our agreement was that we're not contesting, these are texts between her and Martin Rivera. We're, for 307, we are objecting under, that they're not relevant pursuant to Rule 401. The probative value far outweighed by the prejudicial effect on Rule 403. It is an improper stretch use of 3836. It's improper character evidence under 404A and 404B1, and it's a misleading or improper way to use Rule 404B as absence of mistake or lack of accident. It doesn't speak to that. And so for 307, we object for those reasons.
Those are the same reasons that
Right,
were
I'm just reading
attached
for the
to
record.
your motion and limiting.
Yes, Your Honor.
Those objections will be overruled, and the same limitations apply.
I understand.
And Judge, we just ask for a running objection to any, so I don't have to object every time, for everything referenced to any text messages that are the subject of State's Exhibit 307, we'd ask that a running objection to that.
You may have a running objection to 307. Those are the phone records allegedly between the defendant and Mr. Rivera.
Yes, Your Honor.
Order a break. We'll start back at 5 minutes before 4.
As we take up State's Exhibit 3.